Hey, welcome to Beer Christianity. My name's Jonty, and there's no Malky or Laura. Ooh, hiss! We want Malky and Laura. You suck! Yeah. Okay, they're coming later. I first want to just tell you a few things. First of all, if it's your first time coming to Beer Christianity, thanks so much. We're a leftist, progressive, kind of Christian podcast where we talk about faith and politics and culture and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you want to find out more about us, you can go to beerchristianity.co.uk. And this episode features Flamy Grant, a drag artist who works in the kind of CCM milieu, basing her name obviously on Amy Grant and all that kind of thing. It's a very cool interview, and it was only possible because of Greenbelt Festival, which is the best festival in the world, and you should check Greenbelt out at greenbelt.org.uk just to find out more about the festival. They are amazing. The only other thing that's unusual about this intro and about this episode is that usually Beer Christianity will have a drink, even if it's a non-alcoholic lager, or a glass of Prosecco, or a glass or 7 of cider, or something like that, or if you're an American, hard cider. None of that is happening in this one because we were in the press tent. Thank you very much, Greenbelt Press Corps, for making it possible. But we just didn't think it was right to, get hammered while we were doing it in the press tent. So we didn't do that. But I will now drink just to kind of set things right. It's 10 a.m. somewhere. Here's the interview.
Thank you so much, Flamy.
I wasn't rebutting that. Start it again.
No, I mean, at the moment's gone. That was good stuff. I can't read that. It's magic.
I couldn't possibly.
It's lightning in a bottle, friend. Flamy Grant, thank you so much for joining us on Beer Christianity. We really appreciate it.
I'm delighted to be here with the three of you.
And you just done your show very recently up on the Glade stage at Greenbelt. How did you find that, and what were you expecting?
Wow, what was I expecting? I don't think I realized Greenbelt is as big as it is. Also, I didn't know it was on the main stage. So I found that out as we were sitting backstage. Someone said that. They're like, oh yeah, you're here on the main stage, and I don't need to be that close, do I? Okay, great. You're here on the main stage, and I was like, did you say main? And so that was a fun little moment to realize. But man, it was so great. Just very attentive, a lot of eye contact from the Greenbelters, and we love that as a performer. You love when you feel like you're being listened to. So it was amazing, and beautiful day. I could not ask for. Other than I know we had a lot of wind issues overnight that kind of blew some tents around or something. But
yeah, and knocked some trees down. I believe.
Did it really?
For real. So I'm just looking at the trees that looming over this tent that we're in right now.
Let's just ignore those.
Yeah. Are you usually mostly in club settings? Is that?
I do a little bit of everything. Actually, I recently did an analysis of my shows over the last year for my booking agent, and I've played over 40 churches in the past year.
Amazing.
Yeah, which I knew there were a lot. I didn't realize it was quite that many. And then, I'll play music listening rooms, folk clubs, that kind of stuff. And then occasionally, actually, it's less frequent now that I'm in a drag club. That's where I started, was, in the drag clubs in San Diego when I really started doing drag and performing. And now, because I'm really just a singer-songwriter in a wig, that doesn't really play on a Friday night down at, the Play Club or whatever, whatever your local drag bar is. So I hope to get back to doing a little bit more traditional drag because I miss it. And what I miss is my drag, family, all the people in San Diego that kind of would help you. I'm putting that in air quotes when they say girl, you need to fix that mug, or let's tighten up that corset, or whatever it is. I miss having kind of that community. It was really drag is such an incredible community, and I feel like I've kind of chosen this path that has really taken me out solo. So I feel somewhat disconnected from drag in general, and would love to see how I can get back to it, but. That really wasn't the question you asked me, was it?
The answer was better than the question. Don't worry about it.
And am I right in thinking that you started during the pandemic?
I did.
Speaking of isolation.
Yeah, speaking of isolation.
So how did that start? How did you find your people?
I had gone out in drag a couple times just socially in like 2019. That was the first time Halloween of 2019 was the first time I ever did drag. You know, every Halloween a queen gets her lashes. But I didn't have time, you know, like I was a very busy person before pandemic, as we all were, and I had a day job, a full-time day job. I was in a band on the side. I was a worship leader, a volunteer worship leader for my church on the side. So there was just a lot going on. I didn't have time to get into drag. And then pandemic happened, and suddenly time was all I had. So it was, just started with me in my bedroom painting. Well, again, we'll put that in air quotes as well because it's hard to call what I was doing back then makeup. But everybody has to start somewhere, and that's what I did. Just started painting my face in my bedroom, and eventually took it onto a live stream. My husband and I were living with another couple who were also musicians, so we did what every artist did during pandemic and just made our own a weekly live stream show where we did cover songs, and I started showing up on that in drag. So that's really, like, those were my first drag performances, was streaming from our basement during pandemic. And then the community I found in San Diego really, I mean, we had friends in the drag community, and so when the world started to open back up, you know, I just reached out to some of them and I was like, hey, like, would you put me in your show? Like, could I do a number at your show? Or really just, it really starts with showing up and being helpful. Like, that's how you get into the drag world. And this hot tip for anybody who wants to do drag, just show up to your drag clubs and be helpful. Like, run the spotlight, be the tip girl, like go around and collect tips and that kind of stuff. And then before you know it, they'll give you a little spot. And that's what happened to me. I just started getting booked in drag shows in San Diego. It was so fun.
And how has it been for you? I mean, you know, that's not remiss and not miss out mentioning the fact that you are, I think, the first drag queen to have a #1 on iTunes, a Christian on iTunes, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's also like no one else wants that. So, it is an honorific, yes, but it is also like Trixie Mattel is, famous for saying, if you want to be the best at something, find something no one else is doing, and then that will be you. And so that's really what I did. I just found the thing that no other drag queen was really striving for. And I strove and I got there. But it's still not to, I don't want to be the person who downplays the accomplishment, because getting a #1 anything is it happened. Like that's a big deal. And I do celebrate that, and I'm very proud of it. So yeah.
Yeah, and how has it been being kind of a representative of the drag community in the church, the Christian community? How has that played out?
Yeah, I mean, it's
fun, I imagine.
Yeah, well, it's everything, right? Like it's because you talk about being a representative of the drag community, and like there are definitely drag performers who like come up alongside me and are like, "You go, girl! Like we love this. We're watching you. We got your back." That kind of thing. And then I think there are also, I've had not far fewer, but a handful of encounters where it's like, what is this? Like, what are you doing? Like, is this even drag? Like, there's that question kind of gets, the subtext is there sometimes. And, because, I'm not lip syncing. I'm not, I definitely don't do stunts. I am not the death drop girly. And I really ain't, like, it is singer-songwriter that just happens to be in drag. Like, that is what I do. But to me, that's kind of the beauty of drag, is that drag is theater. The thing that connects drag. Can we cuss on this podcast? Oh, you already said
like
that.
a motherfucker.
Yeah, you already good. Yeah, so the thing that connects drag for me in my mind is that all drag is gender fuckery of some sort. Yeah. Right? Like that's the baseline. We're all playing with gender. We're all challenging the status quo and pushing boundaries on that field. But beyond that, drag can be anything. It can be comedy. It can be very dramatic. It can be dance and stunts. It can be singing. It can be lip syncing. It can be whatever, mime, whatever. Puppets. Lots of drag performers use puppets. So that's just what I think it's RuPaul actually who says, like, you bring who you are to drag, and that's what makes it yours. That's what makes your drag you. It's you're bringing what you are, and I've been a songwriter since I was 9 years old. So that's just, to me, it made the most sense in the world. Once I finally like pulled back and saw what was happening and that the people were resonating with what I was doing, I was like, oh, like I've been going down this one path. As a songwriter, I've been going down this path as a worship leader, and I've been, always interested in performance art of some shape or form, but I've always kept them kind of on their separate paths. And here is where those paths like merge and they come together in drag, and it really has enabled me to figure out my life.
So as a 9-year-old then, how was your gender fuckery journey at that point?
Deeply repressed. So I grew up very fundamentalist evangelical in North Carolina in the Bible Belt. So my gender fuckery started at, like the age of 3, probably. There are a handful, just a couple, photos in our family photo album of me coming out in my mom's, nightgowns and heels and like putting on a little show. So at some point, like, they took pictures of that and they thought it was cute, right? But I think what happened is the more it became a pattern, or the more they saw that it wasn't just a one-time thing. Like young me was very drawn to the gender fuckery, which, by the way, was a term that would never have been used in my evangelical home. I think once they saw that was, there was an impulse there was an instinct in me to do that, they worked really hard to kind of shut it off. And so, that's where, as it does for all of us, that's where shame came into play for me, and the roles of the traditional role of gender in society and in our community in particular, like, really came into play. It was like, nope, you're a boy. You have to behave this way. You have to look this way, dress this way, speak this way. And if you didn't, there were lots of ways that you got quote unquote corrected for that, both internally within the family structure through discipline and that kind of stuff, at church, through Sunday school teachers trying to teach you to be more like Samson and less like, Martha. And then, of course, just in your social circles in school, like every kid knows what it's like to be made fun of, and every effeminate boy knows what it's like to be dragged, for who you are, and having to course correct or adapt in order to fit in and stop being the target, which some of us do well and others I tried, but there's not a lot. I don't know, I wasn't very good at the course correcting. Like, it was always kind of there. I used to think I was great. I thought I was so good at hiding, and then when after I came out years later, friends would be like, yeah, we knew.
Did they actually have that disappointing, oh, really? Oh, that's a big shock.
No! I think maybe a couple people who were, deep in the church were surprised, just because there is an interesting thing, I think, that can happen within church circle, right? Where, and I think so many queer folks, lean into, how many, not to be speak to stereotypes, but it's a stereotype for a reason. How many church choir directors are just closeted gay men, right? That is a trope for a reason. Yeah. And there's something about being in church that does enable you to hide a little bit while also not having to fully abandon who you are. It's weird because on the one hand, church is the least safe place to be as a queer person, or certain types of churches, obviously. And then on the other hand, there are churches and church environments that will quote unquote tolerate a lot, as long as you're not overtly breaking what they consider to be as long as you're not overtly sinning. So it's a balance.
So was there a single moment, or was it a process where you stopped that course correcting?
It wasn't a single moment. It was a decade.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a decade-long journey, and actually 2 decades, because, even after I came out fully at the age of 28, but leading up to that, all of my 20s were about the journey of figuring out. First, it was conversion therapy. I self-enrolled in conversion therapy to try to make myself straight. I did that for about 5 years. Didn't work, surprisingly. And then it was how do I, if I'm gay and I can't change that, how do I live within the parameters that I believe are, at the time I believed were still true is that, which was that, God doesn't want me to act on being queer, right? So how do I live? So for a long time, I was just like single and celibate and very open about it, with my church community, with everybody. I was like, I'm gay, but I don't, I'm single and I don't fuck. and then, it was during all of that process that I was also simultaneously like studying the Bible and looking into, more interpretations than what I had been handed through my very narrow, Plymouth Brethren evangelical lens growing up. And, so you start to unpack that and realize, the Bible isn't talking at all about what we think of as, a same-sex loving relationship. That's not what's being discussed in any of these clobber passages and, all of that. So by the time I hit 28, I had done that work and I was like comfortable with, the Bible isn't condemning me for being queer. I'm unhappy and miserable in my life trying to like force myself into this lifestyle, to borrow language, a lifestyle of like celibacy. And so it was like, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to come out and date and all of that. So, but then it was like another decade really before I started asking the gender identity questions. So it's just been there's been a journey, 20 years, Yeah.
And feeling like, so reaching a point where you can kind of confidently say, okay, that's not what the Bible says. Was there still a feeling of that's what God says, or, that shame, I guess, or was there a spark there that you knew God was on your side?
Yeah, I think there's always been a dissonance within me when it comes to feeling what I feel about who God is and what God wants, or the divine, which is really how I talk about it more frequently now, versus what's the black and white text or the interpretations you hear at the pulpit. Like, I always had a dissonance. I always felt like it really feels weird that God is so uptight about a handful of things. And also, the dissonance of like some of those passages being in Leviticus right next to really clear language around wearing mixed fabrics and like when a woman can interact in society based on when she's on her period or not, like those kinds of things that we ignored, like without any kind of, we didn't even talk about it. Like, that's whatever. That's Levitical law. It doesn't pertain to us. Well, I was like, why do y'all quote this one verse from Leviticus at me all the time then? So I always had that dissonance, and I think that once I finally like stopped looking at the Bible as the be all end all, because I don't. And I know that that's a big issue for a lot of Christians, and a lot of Christians hear me say that and write me off. Like that's the point at which folks will turn off the podcast and be like, oh, well, they don't believe the Bible is like God's literal. Why is the phrase completely out of my brain? Inerrant, infallible Word of God.
You got it.
Pastor's kid.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So they'll hear me say that and be like, oh, well, we don't have, like there's nothing for us to talk about if you don't believe that. But, for me, I look at that and I'm like, I have space for you as someone who believes that the Bible is inerrant and infallible. I'm cool with that. If that's your belief, like, I'm cool being in the same tent as you, being in the same faith as you, whatever. Like, I don't know why that can't be reciprocated. I don't know why there's such a like hard line on that from people. But anyway, once I did finally like realize that my intuition and my body and my gut and my experience and my relationship to the world around me and other people speaking into my life, all of those things are of equal value as something like the Bible in guiding me in my life. Like, that shame really like evaporated because finally everything felt correct. I finally found alignment with what I knew in my gut to be true, which is that God loves everyone, and queerness is not a disqualification from being connected to the divine. And that alignment, with it fell into place once I was finally like, oh, the Bible, like, it's not what I've been told. It's a beautiful document. It's a historical document. It is a poetic document. It is the story of a whole culture, and it is, it can be useful for guiding us, and it's not you're not going to find every answer to your modern life questions in the red text, like the red letters. Yeah. Sorry. Jesus did not answer every question for us. Sorry, that didn't happen.
And as your view of the Bible and relationship with the Bible has changed, how has your view of God and relationship with God, I realize, is a loaded kind of evangelical, but how has that changed?
So much. I mean, just that term alone, relationship with Jesus, that used to be such a, it was like a talking point for us. And how is your walk with the Lord? How's your relationship with Jesus? And I don't have a relationship with Jesus. I'm sorry, not in the way that I have with you three. Like right now, we're building a relationship right now. Like I'm seeing you and looking in your eyes and we're communicating. And I'm sorry, but Jesus can't do that, y'all. Jesus, however you want to look at it, is not here. And we can talk all day about, the spirit of Jesus or the doctrines like the Trinity and like those kinds of things. But like at the end of the day, I don't have the kind of relationship. I can't think about Jesus in terms of relationship because relationship is too present for me everywhere else in my life. Yeah. I have a relationship with my husband. I have a relationship with my family, my parents. Like we navigate rocky relationships with them. Like, I just don't have that with Jesus because all I have from Jesus is the text, and I mean, sometimes I can feel really connected to a good book, but even then, I'm not going to say, oh, I have a relationship with Moby Dick, It's just not the language for me.
Is that not a drag name? Because that's a great drag name.
Yeah, I don't know. My mind's turning on dragons, but So just that term alone, I can't use that. I can't that's not a useful term for me. Things like belief. Belief is not a useful thing for me in my current life experience. Belief, by default, by definition, belief can't also be true. If it were a true thing, we would call it truth. Instead, we have to use this word belief because it's the thing we hope is true. And we put our faith in as being true. So, belief for me, and this is not to shade anybody who does, feel belief is very valuable in their journey, because I get that. But for me, it's not. I operate and best with what I can touch, what's in front of me. Call me doubting Thomas, fine, but whatever. I need to... I'm just very visceral that way. I sitting around and thinking about what might happen after I die is just so not helpful for me, because at the end of the day, I'll never know. I'll never know until it happens. And so I would just much rather, my journey has been one of going from where a space where belief is everything, checking all the right boxes and saying, yes, I believe, the Apostles' Creed, all of it, that's the most important thing you can do as a believer, as a person of faith, to now, for me, it is entirely about practice. It is what practices are helping me spiritually to be the kind of person I want to be, have the kind of relationships I want to have, make the kind of impact in the world that I want to make. I just don't sit around checking off beliefs anymore. I just don't.
But your music could be listened to by an evangelical if they could just get over themselves on some shit, right? And be full on worshipful experience. The lyrics feel not a million miles away. Again, with your particular context in there, and I guess it's just how are you feeling when you're singing that stuff?
I mean, I was a worship leader for 22 years.
Yeah, but
so,
it's good worship.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the thing. I think through that experience, I learned so much about, first of all, just the power of music.
Yeah.
It's a unique thing we have as humans, to be able to craft song and craft lyric that moves people. Like, what? That's just a thought from my brain and it makes someone cry? Like, what? That's crazy to me. So I love music for that reason. And as a worship leader, I learned really well how to use it to manipulate a moment. Create a moment, like move people towards a thing that I wanted to move them towards. And I have some regret over how I used to do that, like, because I can barely sit through a modern worship service today, like in my current state, because all I can see is how every little turn of phrase, every chord change, every gesture from the person who's leading, like, is designed to move people into a space of, well, whatever. It can be a lot of things, but for a lot of churches, it's like, how do we make this person come face to face with what we want them to feel, which is that there's a little bit of unworthiness there, right? Like that like, thank goodness God has bridged this gap, because you're kind of wretched and you need this, and that's what keeps you coming back. So it's, to me, I can't go to a worship service really without, like, just experiencing all of the manipulation or witnessing all the manipulation that's happening, and it makes me sick. So and knowing that I used to be such a cog in that system, right? So now I try through my music, if I'm going to manipulate people through my music, and I am, because that's what we do as songwriters, I want to be moving people to look inward and internally. I want them to feel connected to themselves rather than pointing them heavenward or pointing them toward anything else. Like, my biggest goal is to hopefully, what I hope my music does is turns people into, like, looking into themselves so that they can feel grounded and connected and whole as they are. Removing the shame, removing the guilt and the fear that is so ingrained in how church works. That's my biggest goal, I think. And I think that at the end of the day, maybe that's all semantics, because really, maybe I am just asking them to connect with the divine, because maybe that's what that is. Maybe that's what we're connecting with when we turn internal and, like, feel connected and whole and grounded. Like, maybe that's just what God is. So,
I mean, we could be some lame-ass Christians, but that's definitely how we've been experiencing it. Because you were saying, like, you were driving and you were listening to some stuff and you were tearing up, or you said you would have cried if you were more, if you were a more emotionally available human being.
I did what I do when I get wet eyes. Come on. I'm on my own. I'm like, there's no school bullies to point fingers, but they're still there. No, it was when it was talking about there's a line in your song that I read out to the guys. I'm gonna paraphrase it, because me just saying it in a Scottish accent is not how it was designed to be.
Oh, but maybe it'd be even better. We love a Scottish accent.
It's not.
No, it's not. I just spent 2 weeks driving around Scotland, and it was like the best 2 weeks of my life. It's so beautiful.
Did you get good weather?
Great weather.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, like, gray and rainy, but to me, that's the best weather. I love that.
Asking the hard-hitting questions on this podcast.
How was the weather?
I'm so sorry. I pulled you off topic.
It's not hard with any of us.
What song was it?
Was it I'm Not Ashamed?
No, it wasn't.
It was the baptism
Drag
thing.
Me Into.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was What Did You Drag Me Into?
Wow.
So being baptized at the age of 12, under the water, I came under a spell. I heard the Holy Ghost in the chlorine. She said, girl, you better go make a hell of a scene.
That's the line that gave you wet eyes?
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah.
That's not typically one that people quote, so I'm honored.
In such, like, a potentially oppressive structure of, like, as you say, like, what's the church service manipulating people to do? Like, I guess I felt the pressure is to get over the line. Sign in the dotted line, say the prayer, be baptized.
Yeah.
baptized by my dad, who is the pastor. You know, there's all this stuff going on. I'm doing the thing, I'm being obedient, but like in the midst of that, there's a still small voice that you know is the divine, saying, "Turn this on its head, like fuck the system," and even just switching the gender of the divine to she, like that still gets me. Like I'm that basic to go like, whoa.
No, but I completely understand that, because you've spent how many years hearing God only described in one gendered term, right? And I have this conversation all the time with people who still don't believe, people don't believe that the Bible uses both male, female, and plural pronouns for God, and I still have to have that conversation all the time with folks, because of course, it's so ingrained in us. So for me too, hearing God referred to as she is still a healing thing for me. It's like, I forgot, she's mother sometimes, you know, and we need that.
And is that why you kind of still? I want to ask the question: why haven't you kind of ditched the Bible and moved into just, I don't know, your own thing or exploring other stories?
Careful, you might push me over the edge just by asking the question, because I ask it of myself all the time. Why am I still here? Why am I doing this?
No advice.
Yeah, it's. I mean, one thing for sure that I can say is a big part of why I stay is knowing that there's always going to be more queer kids coming up in these spaces. And these spaces are no more inviting to queer kids than they were when I was coming up. The world's changed, yes, and kids have a lot of access to things now that they didn't. But I guarantee that the kids coming up in like my old church and my old school are still as isolated as I was from knowing that there is a beautiful, wonderful, happy, hopeful future for them as queer people, right? So for me, it's about, this is what drag is, right? Drag is designed to be unmissable. It's built into the fabric of the art form. Look over here, don't miss me. I have something to say. And so that's, to me, why drag is such a phenomenal tool in these spaces, because you can't ignore it. You can't ignore when 18 publications from Rolling Stone to People to Today to whatever have a headline that says drag artist at tops Christian music charts. They had to respond, and they did. They did respond. But the beauty of that is that for me coming up, a lot of times it was reading articles from Dr. Dobson and Focus on the Family and that organization. It was reading articles about things that they were condemning that made me aware of, wait,
amazing.
That's an option?
I hope James Dobson hears this.
Right?
Wait, is he dead?
Don't do drugs. What are these drugs you say?
I know. Tell me more.
Drugs sound fantastic.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. People are high. High sounds fun. I want to. So it's all part of it, I'm out on tour and I play shows, and obviously those parents are not going to bring their kids to my show because they're probably sending their kids to conversion camp, that kind of stuff. But hopefully it breaks through, right? Hopefully at least that little message, that little bit of a visual of a drag queen singing about her faith, even though I've already said, I don't do things like belief, but singing about her spiritual practices, hopefully that breaks through and gives them a little bit of something to hang on to until they're able to, not be quite so isolated because of the environment that they're in. So that's really important to me. That's a big reason why I'm still doing what I'm doing. I could get really not woo-woo about it, but just I still believe that there's something. I know I've already said that I don't don't do belief, but while that is also true, I'm not spending my time crafting what my beliefs are. I just feel it. I feel that there's something spiritual or other dimensional or magical or divine. And I may not have well-crafted language for that, but Christianity is what I came up in. It's in my bones. It will never leave me. I have tried. I have tried to leave it, and it doesn't leave me. And so why not, like, just continue to, like, funnel my experiences through some of those rituals and some of those time-honored ways of connecting to the divine, to the spiritual. So, you know, I guess maybe there's a little bit of a fuck you too, in that, like, yeah, fuck you, like, conservative Christians. You don't get to have everything. You don't get to define what this expression of faith, like, who it's for, who's allowed, like, fuck that. No.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it. And you can't stop me. You can rail against it all you want, but I'm gonna do it.
What to me... Oh, sorry, go.
I just talk about some of your songs. One of my favourite songs of yours is Esther, Ruth and Rahab, and it's just a delightful song. I think it's wonderful. And I'm just interested to know whether you have had criticism of, like, I do think this is incorrect, but people saying, well, you shouldn't be able to talk from a woman's perspective from the Bible because you're not a woman. And, and I could see some idiots taking that view.
And they do.
And I'm just so interested to hear what your take is on that.
Yeah, you know, I think that I think it's a healthy discussion to have, because there is something to be said about, like, you know, there are folks who, like, use terms like, oh, it's woman face, which is just so cringy.
Oh, wow.
Cringy and awful, right? Awful. But there are people who take, you know, who use that word, who say that it's, oh, you're appropriating female culture, that kind of thing. And it's a conversation that's worth having, right? Because, like, for someone who doesn't understand drag or doesn't understand the gender spectrum at all, you know, and does believe or only has a concept of a binary, like, that's a conversation that they need to have, and that's what drag is for, right? That drag is here to, like, make people aware, like, to just flip that switch in people's heads that, yeah, gender isn't two things, babe. Like, it's a whole spectrum. And me, like, telling the stories of women in that song in particular. What I tried really hard to do with Esther, Ruth, and Rahab was to tell how their stories impacted me. Like, I'm telling my story, but through the lens of, like, a Deborah who, or a Jael driving her tent spike. That story is insane. It's so wonderful. I love the story of Jael so much. And Miriam, like, you can't read Exodus without, like, I mean, and you can actually, unfortunately, but you shouldn't. You shouldn't read Exodus without seeing the through line of Miriam being, I'm going to cry talking about her because I love her so much. She was just as essential to that story as Moses. Probably more so because she literally did, and, you know, that's the line in the song, like, she kept his petty ass in line. She did. She reined him in and was this, like, counterweight to Moses', you know, just off the walls impetuousness. Like, Moses is the like, perfect example of that, you know. And when men say, "Oh, women are too emotional," we're not emotional. I'm like, y'all are the most emotional, okay? Moses and Peter being your prime examples of, like, biblical male emotion. So I'm all over the place answering your question, but I think that for me, what I'm doing is not necessarily appropriating female culture or, like, doing woman face. I'm expressing me and my gender, and I just don't happen to fall in what people would expect it to, right? Or what folks like that would expect it to. So my gender is fluid. It is all over the spectrum, and sometimes I express myself like you're seeing me now with a full face of makeup, and sometimes I just want to be, like, literally genderless. Like, that's my other goal, is, like, when I'm walking around the world, I told you earlier, like, I'm an introvert, like, I just want to be... Did you ever watch Community?
Oh, the thing. What is that? It's
the mascot.
The mascot.
The Greendale human beings.
The human being.
They're trying so hard to, like, offend no one that their mascot is just a human being, but it's like this... It's like a guy in a white, it's like,
terrifying.
It's so terrifying, and that's what I want to be. I want to scare people with my gender. I want people to be confused and frightened, or just to not have one. You know, like, can I just reject gender altogether. Like, I didn't ask for it. Y'all
Yeah.
put it on me. I don't want it. So, that's the fluidity of it for me. But there's so much good conversation to be had in that question. It's just, are you asking the question from a place of sincerity and good faith, or are you asking it to be an asshole and say, why are you doing woman face? Yeah,
Well, that's a nice answer. I feel bad about shouting, oh, fuck off then.
No, it's fine.
What I meant by that was, totally, you
we
can
need
have
all of it.
this-
There's space for all of it. And some people do need to be told to fuck off. So
Truth.
yeah.
And talking about having those difficult conversations, you were sharing in your set that you have moved back to South Carolina, right?
North
Carolina.
Yeah.
The wrong one. And that must be pretty heavy. Well, not heavy, but pretty big thing. Given the current political situation and vibe,
North Carolina.
how's that? How is that?
It's interesting. North Carolina used to be kind of more of a balanced, purpley state, and honestly, maybe even a little more progressive liberal state. And then the Tea Party thing happened in the States many years ago, and North Carolina became the first state to introduce trans bathroom bills, and so now North Carolina is a mess. And so we really did part of our thinking in moving back was well, let's go where our vote's going to count a little more. We both lived in California for over a decade. So, California will be okay without our votes.
They'll survive.
But North Carolina, maybe our vote counts a little more. Honestly, it's been interesting. I've had more interaction with Tennessee, actually, and what's been going on there, just because of a couple of circumstantial things that I've stumbled into. Really, I'm a plaintiff on a lawsuit against the Tennessee's. I can't remember what they called it, but we Adult Entertainment Act, but it's the drag ban. There was a guy, a district attorney who threatened to shut down or arrest those of us who were performing at a Tennessee Pride event in 2022. And so just because I was the headliner for that Pride event, they asked me if I would be on the lawsuit to kind of, and I was like, of course.
I was waiting for more to this. Just performing.
Yeah. There was a
for.
rash of drag bans. They called them adult entertainment acts that a bunch of southern and midwestern states tried to pass, and some did pass 2 years ago. It was just kind of a thing in 2022, and most of them now have been either struck down in the courts or just didn't pass. They didn't actually become legislation. But Tennessee's had become law of the land, and then somebody in Memphis, a judge in Memphis, ruled it unconstitutional. But even with that, the local DA in East Tennessee, Memphis was West Tennessee, East Tennessee was no, we're still going to enforce it. We're going to shut down your Pride event. And so we filed a suit against him with the ACLU and the Pride organization there, and me as one of the plaintiffs. I think plaintiff is the right word. Defendant? Plaintiff?
No, plaintiff. Yeah,
plaintiff,
yeah.
Thank you. I'm not smart when it comes to legal things.
Watching a lot of
that's
TV.
literally, I'm good, yeah. No, that's literally what I told the ACLU. I was I am happy to, you use me however, but just know that I don't know anything about the courts. I went to a Christian school, and our government class was a joke because we basically said that it was Christian nationalism and we should all be ruled by God. So, yeah. So.
What did you think about your sex ed?
Oh God, that was another story entirely. Yeah. But so I'm actually, as soon as I get back to the States, I'm going to a rally in East Tennessee that is, because it's back actually. The drag ban is now, it's back on the table, and they're still trying to make it the law of the land. So we've got a rally this Saturday after I fly back. Yeah. So it's why we moved to the South. We wanted to be on the front lines, and we didn't realize what that meant, but we're doing it now. So
That sounds terrifying.
I think it would be more terrifying if I didn't know how much most people are with us, right? Most people in America find all of the rhetoric, the anti-LGBTQ rhetoric politically, super distasteful. They're that's not what are y'all why are you wasting your time on that? That's we need good government, and y'all are just here creating these divisions. And so anytime I've had protesters or have been in a situation like this where I'm on a literal lawsuit against a district attorney. Like, the support we get is so much bigger than whatever the loud voices with the signs across the street are. So
That's really good to hear, because that's not the impression that you get from this side of the pond.
yeah, well, that's our lovely media for you, isn't it? Yeah. That's a whole other topic. But no, it's the actual on the ground experience of fighting these things has been super positive for me for the most part. Yeah.
So you were talking about how you said earlier that you're a singer-songwriter in a wig. And I think in some ways the thing that was like more shocking to see in a drag context than the Christian stuff is just the level of like genuine, authentic earnestness and vulnerability, and nothing's in air quotes. Like, how does that feel, and how is it received?
It feels like, thank you for pointing that out, because that is the piece for me that often feels like, if I have an inner saboteur, that's the question that it's posing. It's saying like, are you really a drag artist? Because you're out here singing like these super heartfelt, sincere songs about you're a songwriter, and I don't know. At the end of the day, like, are y'all Drag Race fans? You watch? Yeah. Like, so I mean, you see all the like bravado and the fierceness and the slay and all like all of that is like very much a part of drag culture, but then it is those moments when the queen has like her little breakdown, and Mama Ru like says, on stage, she's like, we need to see like your vulnerability is the key to us falling in love with you, kind of thing. And so I think I just do more of it than maybe your average drag artist. I think like the bulk of my show, like I always open with like the song that would fall in that more fierce category maybe, but the bulk of my show is bearing soul and getting vulnerable and telling hard stories and hopefully offering some hope at the end of it. So I think it just, it's hard to do all of that maybe in a 3-minute lip sync number, which is what most people are familiar with as drag. Whereas I get an hour to like craft this like journey to take people on.
Like a worship service.
It's my ministry.
It's a good thing though. So, not to ask a really cliched music question, but the influences, I felt like I heard queer icon Bruce Springsteen in there. Is that insane? Because it just felt like one of the songs. I turned to my wife and I was just like, hey, like, doesn't this feel like Bruce?
Wow.
And like just the phrasing and the like, especially his later more nuanced stuff that he's been doing, it felt like that kind of songwriting, and I was just like, this is very cool and a very interesting way to then interpret that. From your face, that's not a conscious thing at all.
It's really not, but it does make me want to go listen to
Add to my repertoire now.
It makes me want to go listen to a lot more Bruce, though. let's hear the boss. I mean, no, I wasn't a Springsteen fan growing up, and honestly, never really got into it.
So who are your influences musically?
Yeah, so obviously I'm named Flamy Grant for a reason.
Yeah.
I grew up on Christian music, so that's a big reason why I don't know. Like my reference, like my repertoire of references is very niche. But in high school I did start secretly listening to, because I was only allowed to listen to Christian music, so I started secretly turning on VH1 and sometimes even MTV. And for me, it was Lilith Fair was like the big thing happening in the late 90s that like caught my eye. And so I was so enamored with the female singer-songwriters. Natalie Merchant is probably my favorite songwriter.
Oh, she's incredible.
Of all time. Yeah. So she's like a massive influence, like Sarah McLachlan and Tracy Chapman, just any Sheryl Crow. Oh,
we love Sheryl Crow.
Yeah, like all huge influences on me. And then from there, like, I don't know, I did, in college was where, like, I finally started to branch out a little bit and got into, just more folk music. Nickel Creek was a massive influence for me in college. James Taylor, I got really into James Taylor. So but I never got into the boss, so I feel like I need to now.
I feel like, there's a lot that's swirling around there. And James Taylor, I feel like legally as a singer-songwriter, you have to get into James Taylor.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
it was in the contract as soon as I applied.
They'll arrest you immediately if you're not into James Taylor. Oh, okay, no, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you have a message for somebody who is in a church where they're struggling the way you used to? Sorry, I wonder if the truck could be louder. I'm just trying to... Could we fix this at the fucking truck? Oh my god!
There's another...
A small helicopter is landing next to
the private plane rather than
It's almost amazing we've gone this long without any.
I know, kind of incredible. Yeah. Where this used to be in previous years, it used to be just on the back of the main stage, so you just have...
Oh, helpful. Yeah.
Awesome.
Very well thought out. Yeah.
For somebody who's going through that, who's sitting in a church, they may be on that deconstruction journey, or they may still be very much, this is actually where I want to believe, I want to maintain this thing.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for a person in either of those situations?
Yeah. I guess I would, I think it's always helpful to look at what the people around you are trying to convince you of. And then ask the question why. Like, why do they want me to believe this specific thing? Like, for me, that was where I was able to kind of finally extricate myself from a lot of the shame. It was like looking around and saying, like, why, like, these gatekeepers, what are they keeping? What are they getting out of making the rules so rigid and so difficult for someone like me to navigate? And why does it seem easy for them? Asking those questions. Why is it so easy for some people to like fall into this the parameters that faith has, that religion has set for us, and why is it not easy for me, and like who's benefiting from my struggle, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I just think that's always a really good thing to be aware of. Don't want to lead you to any conclusions, but just it's a good question to ask. And then, I mean, just for folks who are struggling, like, I get it. Like, it's so hard to think about leaving. It took me a long time to leave the kind of evangelicalism that I came up in, because the message that was so thoroughly communicated from day one was that if you do leave, it's not going to be good for you, babe. Like, you're going to be lonely. You're going to be sad. You're probably going to end up, sick. Like, you're going to be ill. Like there were so many threats kind of hung over my head that kept me in line or in place for so long. And the truth of it is that we all have to ultimately, at some point in our lives, take a step by ourselves. And that is real faith to me. Like, that is a real step of faith, is when there's no one else who can do it, it's just you. And you have to say, I'm going to put my foot there and hope that there's something there to support me. And what I can promise and say from the other side is that there is just endless opportunity, endless community. You are not alone. Like, it will feel that way, and you will have to ultimately, I think, take that step alone. But you won't be alone for long. Like, there's so many of us here who are just, by now, well practiced at the whole chosen family thing and building community thing, and we've got a place for you to land. So just it's a question of it's a question of bravery. I think at the end of the day, we all have to tap into our own bravery at some point, and you do have it. It is in you. So
you played some tracks from your new album.
Yeah.
When is that out? What's it called? What's it about?
The new album is called Church, and we think it's going to come out October 11th. Don't hold me to that, because I'm still negotiating a few things with the distributor. I've got a new distribution thing I'm working on. So, but it should be October 11th if all goes well. And yeah, it's called Church because I got a few things to say about that. And it's very much. I think it's if you're familiar with my first record, Bible Belt Baby, it is like a much more. It's in the same like everything, like genre and kind of line of thinking, but it's just such a more focused record because Bible Belt Baby was an unexpected thing that kind of happened. Like I was recording a few songs and then it just kind of blossomed into a full record. This record has been written so intentionally from start to finish to say exactly what I want to say about my experience both growing up in the church, my experience as a drag performer trying to take up space in the church, and then what I hope for and where I would love to see us move from here when it comes to things like church. So it's there's some real like I said, there's some vulnerability and emotional like core to it, but then there's fun drag songs on it as well. So it's not a downer, but it is going to take you on a journey. So, yeah.
Flamy Grant, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank y'all. This was a delight. I appreciate you.
We appreciate you too, Flamy. You've been listening to Beer Christianity with Flamy Grant. Thank you so much to Flamy for giving us your time. You were a delight to interview. Thank you also to Greenbelt for making it possible, Greenbelt Festival. Go and check them up, greenbelt.org.uk, and you can check out Flamy's website, flamygrant.com. On Flamy's website, you can also find a really cool campaign to help trans youth in the southern parts of the United States, which is a very important thing right now, I think, particularly for those of us in the church who recognize the damage that the church has done to trans people generally and queer people generally. You can find out more about Beer Christianity, as I said, beerchristianity.co.uk. You can also find us at beerchristianity.substack.com for more kind of opinion pieces and written stuff. And you can find us on all the socials. Do follow us, do share us. Let us know what you think. You can email us at beerchristianity@yahoo.com. And yeah, thanks a lot for listening. This one was recorded by Laura Durrant, edited by me, Jonty, and the artwork was done by Malky Curry, as it always is. We will see you soon with more from Greenbelt. We have Brian McLaren coming up. We've got a whole bunch of very cool things. So stay attuned, as it were, and be well.